They told me I should sit in the staff lounge, because my dress was lowering the family image. At my own father's retirement party. My name is Lena Whitmore. I'm 34 years old. And I never expected that a night meant to honor my father would become a moment that exposed everything my family never wanted to see. My sister Vanessa is a litigation attorney in Manhattan. My brother Derek flips commercial real estate like it's a sport. And me? They tell people I teach at a small public school downtown. Harmless. Humble. Forgettable. My mother runs the family narrative like a corporate brand. She curates everything, from the seating chart, to the people she prefers not to mention. People like me. I arrived alone. Wearing a plain black dress. Nothing extravagant. Nothing flashy. No designer logos. No statement jewelry. Just me. They didn't know I co-owned the venue they were standing in. Or that I was the founder and CEO of BridgePath, an educational platform used in over 3,000 schools nationwide. I'd always kept a low profile. No press interviews. Most of my investments were made under a holding company with my middle name. They didn't know, because I never told them. I stayed silent. Not out of shame, but to see if they could ever value me without the title, the wealth, or the image. But when my own mother asked me to step out of the family photo, so the real guests could be the focus, I realized it was time. In this story, you'll witness a woman underestimated by her own family, quietly reclaiming her place with a truth they never saw coming. And why real worth has nothing to do with what you wear, and everything to do with the silence you choose to protect your dignity. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? I always love hearing where in the world you're tuning in from. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow, I'm sharing something deeply personal. And it's just for you. The venue shimmered with jazz, white lilies, and wealth. The kind of place my family used to point at from across the street and say, "That's where real power eats." And now here we were. Or rather, here they were, gathered to honor my father's retirement after 40 years of building his construction empire from scratch. Everyone who mattered was invited. City officials, clients, investors, and of course, the family, at least the version they were proud to present. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because I needed a moment to breathe before walking into a room where I already knew I wouldn't belong. The hostess smiled as soon as she saw me. "Ms. Whitmore, it's lovely to see you again," she said warmly. Then she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Emmanuel mentioned you'd be joining tonight. Should I alert the staff, or would you prefer discretion?" "Discretion," I said, offering a small smile. "They don't know." She nodded. "Of course." I took a seat in the bar lounge, ordered a sparkling water, and watched the city flicker below the floor-to-ceiling windows. Denver at night was beautiful. But somehow, it still didn't feel like home. 20 minutes later, the circus arrived. My mother, dressed like she was headed to an ambassador's gala. My father, dignified and tired in his perfectly tailored suit. Vanessa, in head-to-toe couture, with a husband who looked like he measured net worth before shaking hands. And Derek, strutting across the marble floor like he had just bought the building. He hadn't. I stood, smoothing my dress, and walked toward them with a small, wrapped gift in hand. A first edition of The Old Man and the Sea. My father's favorite book. Happy retirement, Dad, I said softly, offering the gift. He gave me a quick hug, nothing more than a polite squeeze, and glanced over my shoulder. Thank you, Lena, he said. Then turned to shake hands with a group of investment partners who had just walked in. My mother didn't hug me. She simply looked me up and down with tight lips and sharper eyes. Her voice lowered to a whisper only I could hear. That dress? Couldn't you have made more of an effort tonight? It's nice to see you too, Mom, I said, keeping my tone light. Vanessa leaned in. Her perfume thick with judgment. God, Lena, even the hostesses are dressed better than you. Try not to embarrass us in front of Dad's clients, okay? Derek was the last to greet me, clapping my shoulder with a smug grin. Still rocking the minimalist look, huh? If you ever want to invest a little of that bookstore paycheck, I've got a few beginner-friendly options for you. I smiled back. Tightly. Wishing I could vanish into the carpet. The maitre d' came forward and addressed my father. Mr. Whitmore, your private dining room is ready. Please, follow me. As the group began to move toward the back of the restaurant, I took a deep breath and fell into step behind them. Already feeling like the afterthought. Then Vanessa stopped walking. She turned, grabbed my arm a little too firmly, and hissed under her breath, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Lena. Seriously. This is Lucielle. Could you be any more underdressed? I blinked. I think I look fine. It's Dad's night. Not a fashion show. She narrowed her eyes. This dinner is $400 a plate. Can you even afford to contribute to Dad's gift? Derek and I each put in $5,000 for his golf trip to Scotland. Before I could answer, Derek appeared beside her, swirling his champagne. Relax, Van. If she can't swing it, I'll cover her. That's what big brothers are for, right? He chuckled. Loud enough to draw attention. My mother came over, gently touching my arm. Her voice low, almost apologetic. Sweetheart, maybe it's best if you stayed in the bar for now. Tonight's about your father, and there's a lot going on. She didn't say it outright. But the message was the same. And just like that, the message was clear. This party wasn't for me. It never had been. It was for the version of family they wanted the world to see. And I didn't fit. Not in their photos. Not at their table. Not in their carefully arranged image. But what they didn't know was that the building they were standing in, the view they were admiring, and the chef preparing tonight's menu, all knew exactly who I was. And soon, so would they. I didn't say a word. Not when they mocked my outfit. Not when they questioned whether I could afford dinner. And not even when my own mother suggested I remove myself from my father's retirement celebration. I just stood there. Still. Holding my purse with both hands so they wouldn't see them shake. A part of me wanted to scream. To shout everything I had kept quiet for years. To tell them who I really was. What I had built. But I didn't. Because that would have made it about me. And this wasn't supposed to be about me. It was supposed to be about the man I used to call my hero. When I was a little girl, my father and I would sit on the back porch and read books together. He'd underline passages with a pencil and say, "Character is what you do when no one's watching." But somewhere along the way, character got replaced by status. And money became the only thing anyone noticed. 3 years ago, I left a steady job in banking. I was burned out, invisible, and tired of pretending I fit in a world that cared more about suits than substance. I used my savings to launch a tiny edtech startup from my apartment. Just me, my laptop, and a dream to create learning tools for schools that couldn't afford high-end software. The company was called BridgePath. For the first year, I couldn't afford to pay myself. I worked nights at a bookstore to cover rent. And when anyone asked, I just told them that was my full-time job. It was easier than explaining something they would never understand. But I kept going. And slowly, it grew. One school district turned into 5. Then 20. Then a national pilot program. Investors started paying attention. We secured a grant from a major foundation. And last quarter, we closed a Series C funding round, valuing BridgePath at over $120 million. None of this, of course, was ever mentioned at family dinners. Because no one ever asked. They talked about lawsuits and property deals and ski resorts. And when it was my turn to speak, they scrolled their phones. The only time they showed interest was when I offered to help with my niece's homework. I didn't mention BridgePath's new state contracts. I just helped with homework and did the dishes. 3 months ago, when my father had his heart attack, my name never came up. Not when he was rushed to the hospital. Not when the insurance company denied coverage for the new cardiac procedure. Not when Derek heroically offered to start a GoFundMe campaign, which barely raised anything. What they didn't know was that the procedure had already been paid for, anonymously. $297,000. From a foundation, funded by me. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because, despite everything, I still loved him. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, he'd remember what it meant to build something. Not for applause, but for impact. Now, standing in that restaurant, I realized something. All those years I spent trying to protect myself from being judged had protected them from having to see who I really was. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. They thought I stayed small because I had nothing to offer. They thought my silence was submission. It wasn't. It was control. It was choice. Most of my staff only knew me as MS Whitmore from Whitmore Holdings. I rarely showed up in person. And when I did, it was never during family functions. To them, I was invisible by design. Just how I wanted it, until now. It was waiting for the moment when truth would speak for itself. And that moment was about to walk through the door. I followed them toward the private dining room. Not because I felt welcome, but because I refused to shrink. Not this time. Vanessa was still whispering something to Derek. Probably some final note about keeping me in the corner. When a man in a crisp black suit stepped into our path. It was Marco, the restaurant's security manager. He looked at me, then at Vanessa. His tone professional but clear. Is there a problem here? Vanessa didn't miss a beat. She gave him her practiced PR smile and said, "No problem at all." My sister was just about to head back to the lounge. Then she glanced at me, as if dismissing a waiter. I didn't move. Marco turned to me. His brows furrowed, then lifted. "Ms. Whitmore?" I nodded. His entire posture shifted. He stood straighter. Then gave a small bow. Madam CEO, he said. Your usual table is always available if you'd prefer it tonight. Silence. Like someone hit mute on the entire room. Vanessa's smirk froze. Derek's wineglass paused midair. My mother's face, blank, calculating. Behind them, my father had turned. Finally noticing something was off. He looked from Marco to me. Confusion growing. Then another voice cut through the tension. Ms. Whitmore. Called Thomas, the restaurant manager, hurrying over. We didn't realize you'd be joining your family tonight. Is everything all right? His tone wasn't casual. It was the kind reserved for owners. For people who sign checks. And that's exactly who I was. Thomas turned to my stunned relatives. Your daughter hosted our most successful fundraiser last month. Raised over $2 million for underserved schools across the country. My mother blinked. You did what? But she didn't get to finish. Because the head chef, Antoine, stepped out from the kitchen, still in his whites. He walked straight up to me, beaming. Miss Whitmore, he said. I've been experimenting with that truffle risotto you loved last time. It would be an honor to prepare it for you and your guests tonight. Guests. He meant them. And then, the final blow. Emmanuel. The owner of Luciel himself. He crossed the dining floor, arms open with a grin I knew well. Stephanie. Only close friends ever called me by my middle name. He caught himself and gave a quick wink. Lena. Had I known you were coming, I would have opened the balcony for you. We usually reserve it for your events, of course. But we could make an exception tonight. Then he turned to my family and said. She owns this building, you know. Bought it through Whitmore Holdings last summer. A brilliant long-term investment. Nobody said a word. For once, they couldn't. Vanessa looked pale. Derek's expression had gone from condescending to recalculating. My mother blinked like she was trying to rewrite the last 5 minutes. And my father. He just stared at me. Not with anger. Not even with pride. But with something that resembled realization. Maybe even regret. I took a slow breath. Thank you, Emmanuel, I said calmly. But I think we'll stay right here. After all, this night is about my father. Emmanuel nodded and waved the staff back to their stations. I turned to my family. I'd be happy to join the celebration. If I'm still welcome. Vanessa, ever the PR expert, snapped into recovery mode. Of course. We were just teasing. Right, Derek? He nodded quickly. Yeah, sister humor. Totally misunderstood. My mother had already slipped her arm into mine. Her smile tight and familiar. Darling. You should have told us about your company. All this time we thought. I know what you thought, I said softly. And that's exactly why I didn't tell you. Thomas the manager returned. The Whitmore party's dining room is ready. Shall I escort you all? Yes, I said. But this time. I walked at the front. Not behind. Not beside. But leading. And for the first time that evening, nobody questioned it. The private dining room at Luciel was stunning. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in soft gold. The city skyline glittered through towering windows. And a string quartet played quietly in the corner. Every seat was perfectly set. Polished silver. Embossed menus. A place where every detail whispered prestige. But the atmosphere had shifted. Instead of pride or celebration, the room now pulsed with awkward silence. My family took their seats, quietly, carefully. Vanessa sat near one of my father's wealthiest clients. Derek angled himself toward a hedge fund manager. Old habits die hard. I was seated near my father. Not at the far end like usual. Not by the door. But right next to him. Where the guest of honor typically sits. The first course arrived. Chilled scallops with lemon foam. Small talk buzzed, thin and forced. People tried to act normal. But every time a server addressed me as Ms. Whitmore. Every time another guest from a nearby table stopped to greet me. The tension sharpened. Even Vanessa couldn't hide her confusion when a well-dressed investor leaned in and said, "It's an honor to finally meet you in person. BridgePath's doing remarkable work." I simply smiled. And sipped my wine. Halfway through the main course, my father finally spoke. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" The room quieted. Even the silverware paused. I set down my fork and looked across the table. Would it have mattered? His brow furrowed. Of course it would have. We would have been proud. I held his gaze. That's exactly the problem. Vanessa shifted in her chair. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said. You're proud now, because I'm successful in a way you understand. But when you thought I was making just enough to get by. When I was working nights at a bookstore. Did any of you ask if I was happy? Derek opened his mouth. Then closed it. No one answered. I turned to my father. Dad, do you remember when I was 12? I won that statewide storytelling contest. They published my short story in a magazine. He nodded faintly. You promised to come to the award ceremony, I said. But that was the same day Vanessa got her early admission letter from Yale. You forgot. His face fell. I remember. Do you remember when I made honor roll every semester in high school? When I got into Northwestern on scholarship? When I published my first curriculum guide? No answer. You weren't proud of me then. You didn't ask. You didn't celebrate. Because it didn't look impressive on paper. My mother jumped in, flustered. We were just trying to push you. We wanted you to reach your full potential. No, I replied gently. You wanted me to reach your version of it. There's a difference. Vanessa's tone sharpened. So you lied? You let us believe you were struggling, just to, what? Teach us a lesson? I didn't lie, I said. I simply didn't explain. Because I needed to know. If you could value me without the packaging. Derek rubbed the back of his neck. That's not fair. You set us up to fail a test we didn't even know we were taking. Maybe, I admitted. But would we be having this conversation right now if the security guard hadn't recognized me? Or would I still be sitting in the lounge? Excluded from my own father's celebration? That question landed hard. You could feel it in the stillness. My father finally leaned forward. His voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Lena. Would you join me on the terrace for a moment? We stepped outside together. The air was cool. The city hummed below. But for the first time all night, it felt quiet. He stood at the edge, hands in his pockets. I had a whole speech prepared. He said. About my career. My legacy. About building something from nothing. He turned to look at me. But it all feels hollow now. I said nothing. I let the silence breathe. Then he asked, "When did we go wrong with you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. It wasn't one moment, Dad. It was 1,000 little ones. You used to tell me character mattered more than cash. But somewhere along the way, success started looking like a number. He nodded slowly. I see that now. He hesitated. Then asked, "That surgery, the one my insurance wouldn't cover. That was you, wasn't it?" I nodded. You never told me. Would you have accepted it if you knew it was from me? His silence said everything. I'd like to get to know you again, he said quietly. The real you. Not the version I thought you were supposed to be. I looked at him. I'd like that too. When we returned to the table, something had changed. It wasn't loud. There was no grand announcement. No apology or sudden group hug. Just a quiet shift in energy. Like the room finally remembered I was there. My father sat next to me now, not just physically, but attentively. He asked about my work. About the schools we partnered with. About how BridgePath started. And for the first time in years, he didn't interrupt me halfway through an answer. He listened. My mother, on the other hand, waited until dessert to act. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Can you walk with me for a moment, sweetheart?" We stepped into the hallway near the powder room. The soft clink of glasses and distant music behind us. She didn't speak at first. Then she turned to me, eyes glossy, fingers fidgeting with the clasp of her purse. I don't know what to say, Lena. I feel like I don't even know you. I looked at her, gently. That's because you never really tried to. She flinched. Just slightly. I just wanted you to have the life I never did, she said. Growing up poor left scars. I didn't want that for you. When I met your father, all I wanted was for my children to never feel that way. I nodded slowly. I understand that, Mom. I really do. But protecting us from one kind of pain doesn't give you permission to cause another. You tried so hard to turn me into someone respectable that you never stopped to ask who I actually wanted to be. She blinked back tears. Your sister and brother, they wanted those things. I didn't have to push them. And I didn't, I replied. But that didn't make me a failure. It just made me different. She was quiet for a long time. Then she reached out and touched my hand. I'm proud of you, Lena. I just wish I'd understood it sooner. It wasn't a perfect moment. But it was real. And that was more than I'd expected tonight. Back at the dessert table, Vanessa waited. Arms crossed. Jaw set. So, she said. You've been secretly judging us all this time. No more than you've openly judged me, I replied calmly. She rolled her eyes. I've worked for everything I have. I've never taken shortcuts. Never played games. I never questioned your work ethic, Vanessa, I said. What I questioned was how you measured everyone's worth, including mine, based solely on status. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then, surprisingly, her voice softened. I've been jealous of you, you know. That caught me off guard. Even when I thought you were working retail, she said. You always seemed content. Like you weren't trying to win anyone's approval. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Then why treat me like I didn't belong? Her shoulders tensed. Because if your way of living was enough, then what was I doing all this for? There it was. The thing she'd never say in front of anyone else. I stepped closer. It's not too late to ask yourself that. Not too late to shift. Vanessa didn't answer. But her silence no longer felt like dismissal. It felt like consideration. And then Derek appeared. He gave me a strange look, half amused, half contemplative. So, he said. While I've been showing off vacation homes and bragging about yacht parties, you've been building something that actually means something. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He nodded to himself. Do you like your life, Lena? Are you happy? I paused. Most days, yes. Not because it's perfect, but because it feels aligned. He exhaled slowly. I don't know if I can say the same. I've been chasing something for so long. I'm not even sure I still want it. I touched his arm lightly. It's okay to change direction, Derek. Even after 40 real estate closings and a brand new Tesla. He chuckled. Then looked at me, not as the little sister he used to mock, but as someone worth listening to. Maybe even someone worth learning from. By the time the birthday cake came out, the room was different. Not entirely healed. Not miraculously transformed. But softened. Shifted. Cracked open in places that had been sealed shut for too long. And through those cracks, something honest was beginning to grow. A week later, they came to visit BridgePath. Not for appearances. Not out of guilt. But because I invited them. And, to my surprise, they said yes. I gave them the full tour. Not the version we show investors. The real one. The classrooms where we test software with actual teachers. The server room humming behind glass. The team of engineers and curriculum designers working side by side. Arguing over algorithms and sentence structures like lives depend on it. Because, in some ways, they do. My father stood in silence as we walked through the development floor. At one point, he paused and watched a teacher in North Carolina deliver a live lesson using our platform. He didn't say anything. But I saw the shift in his face. A different kind of pride, one that wasn't dressed in numbers or resumes. We ended the visit in the boardroom, where I introduced them to our lead developer, also a former public school student. Then to our outreach coordinator, who'd grown up in a refugee camp. Their stories weren't polished. They weren't impressive in the traditional sense. But they were powerful. Human. And real. And suddenly, so was I. That night, over dinner, my father said something I never expected. You've reminded me of why I started my company. It wasn't for the house, or the cars. It was to give us something solid. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was trying to build. He looked at me. You built something better. In the months that followed, each of them shifted in quiet ways. My father launched a mentorship program for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Once a week, he sits with someone who reminds him of who he used to be. And he listens. My mother began volunteering at a community center library. It was awkward at first. She wore pearls on the first day. But she stayed. And now, when she talks about the people she meets there, she does it without judgment. And sometimes, with real admiration. Vanessa started taking on pro bono cases related to educational equity. It hasn't made her any less competitive. But now she fights for something beyond her billable hours. And Derek. Derek sold one of his luxury properties and reinvested into a scholarship fund for first-gen college students. He still drives the Tesla. But now, he sometimes picks up students and gives them rides to interviews. Small things, but real. As for me, I stopped hiding. Not just from them, but from myself. I used to think I kept my success private out of humility. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid that if I showed them who I'd become, and they still didn't care, that would hurt more than anything. But now I know. You can't control how others value you. Only how you value yourself. So I live with less fear. And a little more light. I still wear simple clothes. Still drive a practical car. Still keep a photo of that old bookstore in my office. Because it reminds me of who I was when no one was clapping. And who I became when I finally stopped waiting for it. Success isn't the applause. It's the silence you stop accepting. And the truth you carry when no one's watching. Have you ever felt like your worth was overlooked? Because it didn't come with a title or a trophy? Have you ever had to prove that quiet doesn't mean small? If you have, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments. And if this one stayed with you, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Because tomorrow, we go even deeper. And you'll want to be here for that.